So trying to simplify where I can and all that. But no, I'm having a good time.
Good. Greg, do you stay in touch with Daryl quite a bit?
A little bit, not a ton. Obviously, he's a busy man.
Because the two of you seem to use the same languaging, and I'm really impressed with the forward thinking part of it. And I'm curious, but have you read his second book?
I've not.
Well, I've been going through it meticulously, and it really has impressed me because he's taken a completely unique look at offensive hockey transition to defense, where he's thinking of how to get the puck back, not how to defend. And that really stuck out with me. It was quite impressive. The forward thinking he takes with offensive hockey, and we used to say, think a pass ahead. Well, as soon as there's a loss of possession, the immediate thinking process is, how do you get it back relative to where you are in the situation? And it's pretty good, pretty impressive for me.
Is it kind of the like changing of the mindset from like rather than defending and absorbing? It's more like I like using this terminology of like I play you as a defenseman. Like I'm getting the puck back. I'm playing you. I'm telling you what's open, what's available. I take away the space. Like I'm in
Yeah,
control of the
yeah,
situation, even though you have the puck.
yeah, totally. It's it's just next level thinking is when they do have the puck in your zone, wherever they have it, everybody else is more important than the guy on the puck carrier. And defensive hockey is sort of the one-on-one on the puck carrier, and everybody reading off of that. And he takes it to another level of positioning, winning space, being to the puck first whenever it turns over, and then breaking it out, of course, from transition. So it's a pretty darn interesting book, and I found it, for me, easier to understand than his first one, because it really resonates with the way I've thought all along. And the only thing that's different, that's new, is the idea of getting the puck back. That's rather than defending and then getting the puck back. It's it's more about having an offensive mindset when you don't have the puck to get the puck, which is a different way of thinking, a more aggressive way of thinking. I think it's pretty valid.
I just love the attack mindset. I don't know how many times you see during a game players just switch off and like the mindset of always being engaged, always participating, and having a goal and objective. I think is really critical.
Yep. Well, I've always said the transition is the game within the game, and I referred to it uh, years ago with Dave King in Japan. We were trying to write a bit of a module for the Japanese to get a mindset to play the game better and be more alert. And in the end, we just felt that the game is transition to possession, whether it's defense to offense, offense to defense, to get it back. And the game is the game within the game that is vital to the success you have. And I really believe that people are starting to appreciate transition means, okay, I'm going to get the puck, and its transition is a long pass. But transition occurs in those mini moments in every segment of the ice because the puck changes possession so many times to take time advantage of the time and space. I call transition as sort of a brain fart moment. There's that jet lag or pause and oh my god, what's happening, and then reacting to it versus foreseeing what could happen and being in a position to make it happen in your favor. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Because like you think about transition, it's moving from one to the next, and it could whether be mindset or physical based on turnovers or whatever. But like you can transition to defense while possessing the puck as well. I think that would be a critical distinction. Something I like to talk about, like as you're going attack, you mentioned like having a pass up at the ice of like if you're carrying it, worrying about like defeating the back checker and cutting them off because tracking is so big in today's game. So how do you go against that? Because there's always that cat and mouse of okay, this gets prioritized, so everyone's back checking. So now what do we do? So I think defeating the back checker is a big concept that isn't out there enough. Um, Obviously, I'll be talking about it shortly with my newsletter, but would love to see more conversations about that. I think another area of like the cat and mouse game is like everyone's talking more aggressively about defending, skating forward.
Yeah.
But on the opposite side of like, how do you counteract that as offense? So I always hear defensive solutions. Very rarely do I hear offensive solutions. So I like where we're heading with the conversation, which is talking about, okay, so this is what's happening. Now, what do we do from the opposite side? And same thing with the goalies. Goalies have very technical teachers and they're specialty coaches. And you don't see that with shooters or the opposite thinking of like, how do we reverse engineer? How do we deconstruct and gain an advantage?
Yeah. Now, Greg, I understand your thinking, and it truly is thinking beyond the moment. It's almost thinking to the future, playing to the future, and the word anticipation of what's going to happen and being ahead of it. Um, how much is too advanced for coaches and then players at whatever age? Because we are strictly myself, black and white. Offense, you got it. Defense, you don't. And that transition moment really isn't thought of as much. And you've even taken it to a different degree.
For me, it's a level of detail. Just like what level of detail are you ready for? Like at the NHL, when you're thinking about power play one timers, like they're thinking about the spin of the puck and how does that affect the accuracy of the shot and where they're trying to put the puck. You know, then you drill that down to minor hockey, just happy if you hit the net. So, or there's a million different ways you can go about it. But for me, it's just a matter of what level of detail you're currently at. How far can we get you along that curve? Because you need to understand where they're at to take them to the next step. You can't go too forward into detail because then it all becomes mumbo jumbo and they're thinking too much and now you get paralysis. So for me, it's just about what level of detail can we add. Like that's always a compliment from coaches. Oh, he's such a detailed player. He gets the small things right. All of that. So for me, it's a matter of just figuring out where your group is, whatever that is, or your players at, and being able to add further detail into their game, and just chiseling away at one thing after another rather than going detailed to start. So I mean, I have a high school team here in Ohio, and I guarantee I'm not talking about the spin of the puck on a one timer. That would be way too much. It's trying to meet them where they're at.
How do you find, and you've mentioned it to a degree, but just clarify, how does your thinking apply to the age groups you work with? If you can give me a practical example, you've mentioned, okay, I can understand them not thinking of the spin of the puck on a one timer, but I want to simplify it to shooting from the point and making sure it's not blocked, number one. Number two, making sure it's any shot taken from anywhere isn't a breakout, missing the net. That's sort of the level of the thinking in the late 90s, early 2000s. But players today, young players today, how much do they comprehend in your mind that we might have underestimated them? What's your thought on their ability to process all this?
I mean, kids aren't dumb. They have brains too. But for that exact example, for me, it's less about like, oh, we don't shoot from here because it's like a free breakaway for the other team or free breakout. Um, the conversation starts with shot quality versus shot quantity. Like, do we need shots from everywhere, or do we need to maybe possess the puck because that opens up more? Because especially at the youth level, like there's just so many mistakes. With the NHL, you make like maybe 2, 3 big mistakes or medium mistakes per game. At the youth level, it's much higher than that. So even just possessing the puck is something that's good. Eventually, you do need to get a puck at the net, but when do you do that? And basically, the idea for me, my group is, do we have numbers at the net? Are there actual bodies there? Or are we just slinging it to sling it? Otherwise, let's just possess and play together. And that then also feeds into the idea of like, okay, well, now we are going to have possession. We're going to have people in support, which is good defensive structure for any kind of transition in the first place. And if we're not shooting pucks from bad angles, you're not really seeing rim outs. If you're shooting from the slot, very rarely is it going to lead to a free breakout for the other team. Like for me, I'm not a big fan of pass off the pad, so I don't really like teach that much. Um, Players can do it, but for me, it's just a level of detail. Like you say it, and now players like key into it, and they forget about everything behind them, and usually the trailer's the better move there. So it's like, what do you selectively direct their focus and attention to? And for me, it's thinking about, in that exact example, shot quality, and then looking for players all around them. So raising the awareness of, we don't have to go directly at the net all the time and just force everything there and then crash. How can we play together as a team, which is for me a lot more enjoyable to watch, and two, a lot more enjoyable to play because you have the puck a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of a person that is trying to uh, do what's best and simplest to win. Um, when you say passing off the pad, I think of deliberately shooting to the pad and then in tight, passing to yourself off the pad. It's a pretty important tactic. And I'll tell you a little story, and this is where the advanced thinking comes in. Like, I really believe in direct attack, and this is Yuri Kralich's scoring progression for 2-on-1s. The first stage is shooting to score or shooting off the pad with the second player going to the net. And quite often, the puck becomes free and the goalie is frozen because he's he's frozen thinking of the shot, and he's locked in his positioning, and the rebound he can't save. And in tight, in low zone offense, this happened in the Stanley Cup playoffs, I believe, 2 years ago. Jim Nill, who is a friend of mine, managing an NHL team, uh, I'm not sure if it was Corey Perry, scored a winning goal in overtime, and I was watching it on TV, and I thought he passed off the pad. He did something that I had talked about with other hockey people, and he did it in the game, I thought. And I phoned Jim right after it happened. He was down in the room, and he said he would ask him, and he did. And the player, I believe Corey Perry, the detail to which he described what happened, he did pass off the pad. He also explained the reasons he did, where the pressure was, and what was available, and how the pad was positioned relative to where he was going. He processed all that information. So that's the frightening thing about this is kids, to me, they know what shoot to score and hit the net means, how important it is, and that's sort of been the fundamental stat is we just want to keep track of our shots, whether they get through, whether they're accurate on net. That's sort of the simplification of the thinking that's fundamental to success. Now, advancing it, we're getting into talking like stuff I'm talking about. So when you say pass off the pad, are you saying shoot off the pad, thinking it is actually a pass, but it's a part of deception because its speed itself is too hard for a direct pass to complete? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like you're shooting and passing off the pad, going for a teammate on the other side. And you mentioned in that story, like what I'm really trying to get players to do, which is be aware of their surroundings. They can make a good decision and understand that is an option, not the option. So you mention it and show players, and you do a drill that shows pass off the pad, and then that's all they think about for the next month plus, and then they overuse it when the better option could be a trailer. So for me, it's how do we transmit belief and then alter and adjust focus for players. So for me, it's all about raising awareness and getting people and players to think beyond themselves, and what they're trying to accomplish and can they accomplish it with teammates and others. And there's many ways as you dive into a practice or a program of ways you can do that. Like for me, I try to not use my whistle at all. So now players are actually looking at each other. Are we starting the drill? Are we going now? Rather than waiting for me to initiate it, they're working together. They're having to look around in their environment. They're having to listen for each other, which I think is the more critical piece in development, more than just us teaching.
Do you feel that's happening at the higher levels more often than not?
Um, I don't really have great insight into that. I know people that I am aware of, and they're doing that more often than not. But I'm not going to speak for the broader world.
Well, my thinking is that at the highest level in the NHL, and a large percentage of them are more tuned into being aware and wanting to know what happened and what's happening and what they would do differently. The iPads at the bench caused me to believe that. And coaching, which has gone from yelling and telling, now these players who have played many years at a high level, what are they seeing? What are they thinking about in terms of what they're looking at? As a coach, I want to know because I'm sure their insights from their vantage points are far more important than my thoughts standing behind them. So I'm thinking that they're thinking for themselves now, and the era of getting them to play this way to win and dictating it is it's got to be a cooperative venture, a collaborative venture with players. And I think coaching at that level and any level has to become one of questioning. And that's sort of the change because questions lead to thought. And the answers, if properly listened to, should further thought. So I believe young players can do that sooner than later, but being conditioned and educationally being brought up in a traditional fashion uh, without having to think but memorize, I'm not sure to what degree in education that's the case today, but that certainly was the case growing up as a hockey player.
As they say, like the brain that does the thinking is the brain that does the learning. So how do you find ways to put your players in reflective states where they have to, go through their feedback loop themselves to become their own best coaches? I mean, that's really how you get people to develop in general, let alone hockey, right? Everything's a learning competition. It's just a matter of what we're learning. Um, I depending everyone's different, but some players put too much into physical, but some put too much into mental, and finding that right balance is obviously critical.
My thinking is the coaches affect the process. They affect the learning, thinking, or lack of. Um, how do you balance working with coaches who affect the process of learning?
So
And
coaching coaches,
yeah,
well, um, with USA Hockey, I'm a coach developer within the education system, and I mean the first thing to truly understand about when you're talking about coaching coaches is the difference between youth education and adult education. Adult education, obviously, there's a lot more life experiences to pull from. So there's, gonna be that component, and then the second piece, which is a lot of things are kind of ingrained. So giving general ideas is usually received better. Um, Guiding questions, like someone does a bag skate, man, why was that so helpful for your team? And they start rambling through, and like it's gonna give them more focus. Like, oh, do you think that you could potentially get that from a small area game? Like that's one where you can kind of lead them down a path. The other one is just like get them in a state of thinking um, about a bag skate, thinking like, so bag skate, how did that help your players get better? Just kind of leave it at there and just go. And it's really hard to get to adults sometimes because some of them are so ingrained and others are very open and super easy. But just it's kind of like a therapy session and every single interaction of being able to ask a good quality question for the adult, and having them lead themselves to the water per se. Instead of leading the horse there, they lead themselves there. um and if anyone's taken 2 seconds to study like how do people actually change, and it's very rarely from someone giving them a stern talking to. It's more so about them wanting to change because they see something differently. And the best way to do that is to ask a question about seeing something differently or giving focus on, okay, you said you wanted to have fun, you wanted puck touches, and you wanted your players to play better so they can make passes. Like, is a bag skate helping that? So how do you bridge that gap? So for me, it's like understanding the difference first and foremost. Kids usually need a little more background information. Adults generally just need to be able to be refocused in the right way.
can you give me some examples, practical examples that you've used recently with your team, your players, um, doing that, the inquiry method of coaching?
Yeah, and then there's a gentleman I got to introduce you to. His name was Chris Seaver. I had him on the podcast. I think you'd like that episode. And he just comes from like a physical education background. He has these cool. Um, I'll get to the example, but he has these cool like cards that he brings out onto the ice, and he'll flip through and it'll have like questions on them, so you can kind of just mess around with them. It's really cool. I've got to find some exact examples. He's sending me a packet of them, which is going to be really cool to mess around with. But for me, I would say coachless drills. Like I want to have activities that are coachless where I'm not actually running it. So I'm actually using my coaching skills. So that would be observing, explaining, demonstrating, checking for understanding. And we call it questioning, but really it's getting them in a reflective state to think or shaping their focus of what should they potentially be looking at that they're not thinking about. So expanding their horizons. That those are the big items. Um, if I when I'm truly doing skill stuff with like a one-on-one with players or small groups, like I'll bring the iPad out and we'll watch video together and we'll point things out and what do you think about this? What do you feel about that? Um, like for example, one time I did a skating lesson. I'm like, so do you feel that your upper body's stacked on your lower body? And I didn't even have to make any other corrections. And just with that, they talked like, yeah, I kind of feel like I'm a little bit too on my toes, and they just sat back a little bit further. And the progression of improvement was way better than if I would have told them, all right, get your weight back. Instead, they're truly like feeling and thinking about, oh, where is my weight on my blade? Um, that kind of stuff. Or through turns is a common issue where you get players on their inside edge on their outside leg rather than their inside leg outside edge. Like, where's your weight on the turn? And then they talk through it and they're like, I actually don't know. Let me go test this out. They go test it. They come back. Oh yeah, it's on this leg. And well, what if you put it on the other leg? What does that do? And they go and test that. And it's kind of that self-discovery process. So that's really cool. All right. And I found an example of these cards. So they're for like small area games, for example, or just like any kind of game that you have. So one, he said it's called give and go. Score off a give and go, and that equals 2 points. So they had different scoring for that. And that goes down to the idea of constraints led approach. So that's one. Let me think about the high school team. A good example of that. One was just like off-season training, actually. So I was talking with one player who had a pretty decent shot, and I knew worked a ton on it. And I was like, how often do you work on your shot? He's like 2 3 hours a day. The kid sitting next to him is the kid I really wanted to get at, because I knew he wasn't doing as much as he thought he was. Like he thought he was working hard, and he really wasn't. He's like, I shoot like 2 or 3 times a week for an hour or so. And the other kid said that, and you could see the eyeballs light up a little bit. So I checked back in with him recently about a month and a half ago. And I was like, so how often are you shooting these days? Like I shoot every day, often until my arms just are so tired. I can't shoot anymore. I'm like, wow. All right. That's quite the improvement. I can really, and I could tell in a shot. I mean, it was so much better, but just like getting them to understand on their own terms a little bit, those kind of questions. Sometimes you do need to point things out because it's not obvious to them, but definitely finding good questions. I feel like some of the worst questions are like, why did you do this? Because then it kind of sounds like you're accusing them of something uh, when you really want to understand the why, but maybe not using the question why to get at that is also, I think, a powerful thing to have coaches think about.
The art of questioning, it sounds like that's what this gentleman is mastering. Um, we're still not there yet, as a population of coaches. Um, like my role is mentoring, and I'm really having trouble using the questioning process versus the telling process. And I'm just letting them do their thing and figuring out a way to make them aware of how their thing could be better. And I really haven't discovered that. And I'm just communicating with coaches. I'll give you the simplest of examples. Um, you know what a bag skate is, and
Yes, the worst thing in hockey.
it is, but it's very common. Well, this particular coach who had played in the NHL for about 12 years, uh, he did a brilliant thing. The players were late, they lollygagged themselves onto the ice, and he made the point with a bag skate that punctuality mattered. And these were U13 girls. So I admire that, okay, he's disciplined enough rather than scream and yell. He felt bad because he wanted to compliment them for the game they played, winning a tournament with a 1-0 victory, being able to shut the other team down, playing without the puck. Now on the bag skate, I watched the Calgary Flames do a similar bag skate at the end of a practice. And you know the lightning drill, and at least a half a dozen players stopped on their favorite side. And they weren't stopping both, using all their edges both ways. So it's a habit that's going to happen in the game that's going to affect decision making because they're going to be turning away from the puck, not seeing this play or this situation. So my only concern with him was, okay, I understand the punishment piece. The parents appreciated it. The kids got the message, but he could have accomplished so much more by having them face him standing on the boards. And he would accomplish a lot more as asking them, what's better about this than what we just did? But the coach doesn't get it, the players don't get it, then we lose out on what I call the subtleties and the details of good habits and the purpose of what you're doing, accomplishing something worthwhile.
I struggle. I just don't see any advantage whatsoever with the bag skate. Breaks down your form. It makes hockey less desirable. Like I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I think punishment. The girls fooled around the dressing room and got out in the ice late. And here you have a coach who you're trying to teach respect and punctuality. That's what matters most. And what's the better way to do that? You take away something. I don't know. I'm just saying that's the
And
traditional
then
way of doing
don't
things.
practice.
No, I understand, but I believe a tactical bag skate is very valuable. In other words, the attention to detail I'm playing on it. If you line them up on the dot line, the length of the ice, facing the boards, and you teach them to stop and front foot stop and rotate their head and shoulders slowly at first, and then always facing the end or the score clock at one end, they're going to accomplish a lot more by going slowly to do it right at half speed and then at full speed. And it is a bag skate.
Well, then hide the bag, right? Like do it within a
Yeah, yeah, you're
transition.
right.
Like do it within a practice. I mean, like your team stunk in the weekend, for example, is the most common reason for a bag skate. And like, is it because they couldn't skate well? Their conditioning was bad. It's probably because they needed to play hockey better. And you're not developing anything by doing a bag skate. You're just wasting an hour of time, making
Yeah,
your skating worse. Like I just don't see any advantage to it. Like if it's truly like terrible, like maybe you're starting with skating and your players don't want to go out and like, okay, we got to go through skating again. Like that's not comfortable, not very desirable. Maybe you start with a small area game and now you got players literally like crawling to get out there because they want to go and compete against their buddies.
yeah.
I just struggle. I don't like if I know there's some people who are up standing like you never shorten the bench type stuff. Like for me, I will always stand up with the bag skate being an absolute waste of time and a terrible idea.
Oh, I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to validate it. I'm just saying, how do you massage it so you hide the bag in the skate? And I think if you know how to ask questions, you really have to be ahead of the game in your coaching. You can't be reacting emotionally to them being late and showing anger, which is what happens with parents and coaches and teachers, and they aren't able to make the best of a teachable moment. So, putting it simply, that was a teachable moment. And from my perspective, it was viewed as being a good thing for the players to be taught that lesson. They won't be late again. That's the purpose. The purpose isn't there's certain purposes in the depth of whatever you're doing, and that's sort of the surface purpose of what's being done, let alone learning to stop both ways, learning to stop both ways more efficiently with front foot stops and T-starts, and then getting some physiological advantage from the bag skate. So those are the details I think that go into being a part of the art of coaching. I think if you don't deal with what I call cardinal issues, punctuality is accountability, it's responsibility, it's the foundation of becoming a better person and a better player. So to me, um, you can call it punishment. I call it a methodology of teaching behaviors, behavioral coaching. But you've got to be yourself, unemotional about it. And that's sort of where I come from. So I guess I'm trying to validate and stand up for that coach who did it because he's highly respected for what he does. But the details for me as a mentor in stopping both ways and using a stop and T-start technique. The story I have with the Calgary Flames, knowing the coaching staff, I talked to one of the assistants after they did a bag skate, and I mentioned I didn't ask him what you could do better, what could you do differently. It's sort of like that might be more embarrassing. I just suggested the coaches stand on one side and the players always face them when they stop and start because they had a bad habit. And a week later, I think it was 2 practices later, they did a tactical bag skate from the blue line. The forwards on one blue, the D on the other. The forwards did stop and starts, not stop and crossover starts. They did, not the technical ones that I think would help more. But they went a quarter, came back, halfway came back, 3/4 came back, far blue all the way back, and it was all out. But at least they faced one direction. The D did transition skating, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and back, forward to backward. So to me, that was a pretty important point because if they're going to turn their back on the puck over skate situations, those are bad habits. And I don't know how else to correct habits, to improve habits. How can you take the time to ask questions so they come to the point of saying, oh, yeah, I should have done that? Do we have time as coaches?
I go back to the idea of coachless drills, of being able to find situations where we're taking ourselves out of the drill to be able to have conversations, ask questions, interact. And you can't get to every single thing, right? Like you have to choose what's most important. I think with video today, that's such a critical piece. Like you can go back and watch a practice. Like I go back and watch all my practice. Like how did things flow? Did I stay too long on the drill? Like did we stop kind of getting the big growth through the activity? Like were we getting any growth through the activity? Like what was good, what was bad, what worked, what didn't work? Who should I have talked with? Who, and a lot of times I'll even just like clip something and send it to players, or like I'll build like a little playlist of like, all right, you screwed this up, you screwed that up, you screwed that up. Like we need to not be a drill killer here. Like where's the breakdown? Have a conversation before we even get on the ice. Rather than kind of going straight to punishment of like you screwed it up, we got problems. Like here, let's have a conversation on it, or at least 2 seconds to bring it up and give you a warning of like, okay, this needs to improve. Otherwise, we're gonna have some issues. And kind of set the table on that rather than going straight there. But I would definitely say I'm a player's coach over anything else.
I'm just making some notes here. I think being able to have a conversation about it. Um, Speaking about coaches, not yourself or myself, patience to do that. Patience and time to have that conversation. Um, Coaches have a plan, they have a number of drills, they want to get through them. And that almost precedes the purpose of the drill and taking the time to possibly not do all of the drills, but do some of them and have conversations about them within them. So that's something that hasn't really happened yet, at least in minor hockey, I think, where you see coaches taking the time to talk and discuss things with players.
Well, there's a few things that play on that, right? Like when you first go through something, you're maybe not super comfortable with it, especially if you're like a new parent, new to coaching, and you're not comfortable with the whole environment yet. Like, you just want to do what you're going to do and go through with it and get it done and make sure it's done properly and well. So there's that component, and obviously, the more comfortable you get, the more you're taking in a wider spectrum of in a wider view of everything that's going on. So there's that component to it. Um, there's a great quote I saw once. It was like, lucky people are more relaxed and open, therefore they see what is there rather than just what they're looking for. It's just kind of like being relaxed on the ice allows you to see more, take more in, and then be able to choose tactically what do we need to approach, whether it be questioning, pointing things out. Um, there's a million things you can do there. So, when I'm mentoring coaches, it's all about like, okay, you have an idea what you want to do and accomplish, and just let it unfold in front of you. Like, turn the ship where it needs to turn sometimes and bring something to focus. And there's no problem with that. And sometimes you're not going to get to everything you want to, or you got extra time at the end because you're burned through it so fast. But just let it kind of unfold at its own pace. These are people, not machines. So just be relaxed, open, take things in, and let it go. But there's definitely that component when you're in that environment for the first time, especially if you're a new coach and coming into this. You're not used to it. You want to get things done, and that's just a natural human thing. So it comes with time, and just as players are developing, a lot of coaches are developing as well. But just getting people to be more relaxed and realizing the benefits of being more relaxed out there as well, I think is super important. We don't talk about that enough, and everyone knows that person that is kind of like a bulldog. They get in, get out, they're done, but they miss a lot of the details. It's the same thing of like F2 going harder than that. Like, I did my job, coach. I went harder than that. Okay, well, you forgot to stick pick on the way through. You didn't stop at the net. Like, you missed all the little details that could have made this a lot better. So that's my 2 cents on it when we're talking about coaches getting into it and having that plan, and just being able to be more lucky, take more things in, and have a better experience overall.
When you said F2 example, and you said, well, you did this, you did that, and just the idea of taking the time, that didn't take much time for you to tell them what they could have done. But if you said, what could you have done differently or done better? And that
And
takes
that's
time.
it's a little broad of a question. I think there's another piece to this too. Is like when we're asking questions, like also need to be focused. All right, you were going harder than that. That was your role. You went there and did that well. How else could you have helped your teammates along the way? Like that, I think that's a key component. Like even with intermission talks, too often I see coaches that they've made the decision to go to more questioning rather than yelling or telling. But they go like, "What did we do well? What did we do bad?" And it takes so long to actually get to what they want to talk about, rather than, "Hey, we're struggling to deal with their pressure on the power play. How can we be better on our power play to deal with their pressure? And truly get into that kind of level of detail, and players can actually imagine the situation and come to the table right away with good answers.
I like to use a term that a friend that I'm sure you know, Thomas Pacina. Are you familiar with Thomas?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, Thomas and I have worked together for many years, and he uses the term extreme focus, where he'll, working with a small group of players, professional players, they would be doing something, and then they would go to the bench and talk about it and think about it and come back and do it much, much better. after the conversation. So I've seen him do that. I've done it one time working with a small group in a competitive game where they were just sort of going through the motions and weren't really sharp in the details of doing it well. And we didn't go to the bench to sit down and think about it and talk about it. Just standing on the ice, we did. We talked about some of the details, some of the habits, and the importance of good habits and focusing to bring the energy that you need when you do a drill to get better. And they did. The impact of that time, taking that time to communicate, was worth canceling a drill for. So you got something out of the drill you were doing. So it gets down to, extreme focus, which is really, really being introspective in thinking about what you're doing and how it could be done better. That's an art. It's an art
Yeah.
that takes time, and I'm not sure um, how people are going to get there sooner than later, but I understand what you're saying. I sure am curious about this gentleman who's got these series of questions um, because we're not there yet. Coaches aren't there yet. I believe they are when they work with one or two individuals or maybe 3 to 6. But when you have an entire team and um, you have a staff that largely is just pushing pucks, you're not able to engage them all to allow them to uh, learn from doing it. Um, it's an ever, it's a cycle of uh, spinning your wheels, doing things the same way. And that we haven't changed enough, at least here. Now, Craig, when you started coaching, how did you get into this kind of thinking? At what point did you begin to reflect on things to the degree that you do?
My dad is a coach, so I've thought about it this way for a really long time. Like I can't remember not thinking about it this way. And then my mentor, when I first started coaching, he approached, like for example, the first thing he did was like, all right, I'd like to have you join the staff. You're not allowed to join until you read this book. It was called Inside Out Coaching. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name. Joe Ehrman is the name of the guy. So it's called Inside Out Coaching: How Sports Can Transform Lives. So it's a short, relatively short book, easy to get through. But it's always been about this kind of approach of like realizing sport was designed in the first place and organized not to go and win stuff, but to develop good quality human beings and citizens. So it's always kind of been that way. And going back to what you were talking about, like with questions and whatnot, I got two examples that I wanted to bring up. One is I had a summer league game, so I really hadn't coached the team yet. I was coming into my first year, and there was some players like terrible puck watching. Like they would like flies on a fly trap, just like going towards the light and couldn't help themselves. I was like, okay, so you keep getting players behind you because you're watching the puck. What are some ways that we can figure out what's going to happen away from the puck? We can watch the other players. Now, I knew dang well because they're incoming freshmen that they're going to over exaggerate this, and they literally would not even watch the puck. They just watch their opponent, which obviously is also a big problem. But it got them to the idea and doing it in a very safe environment. Summer league's no big deal. And by the time the season came around, like they're very good at not just completely watching the puck. So much more positionally sound, more aware of their surroundings. So that was really good. But that was the question of like, how can you know what's happening away from the puck? Simple question, good answer, gets them thinking, gets them behaviorally changing without me having to be like, you've got to look around out there, which might have gone, probably would have gone in one ear and out the other. And really not been that like Like eventually something has to be personalized to you, and the only way you can do that is if you come up with it yourself in some capacity. So that's why reflective states are so important. So that's the same point there. The second piece is, I watch a lot and listen a lot just because I'm a curious person. And one of the things I commonly see from players that win a lot of, like, there's so many superstars out there, but the ones that seem to really go over and into championship winning all do this exact same thing, which is they teach their line mates, their teammates to see the game how they see it. They're constantly communicating, they're constantly talking to them and teaching them up to see the game how they see it. So that's something that I think is super important, is finding ways to open those lines of communication, especially from veteran to newbie. Whether, like, for example, Don Granado just talked the other night. He's the Sabres coach, about pairing basically his two superstars. I think it was Tage Thompson and Skinner with really brand new rookie Zach Benson, who just got drafted, I think 8th overall, and how helpful that was. And he was doing that literally with his entire roster as you guys, veterans, and the ability for him to have to coach less and how much they're able to absorb and get to know and see the growth was super impactful for him. So I thought that was a really cool point to make.
I've got a related example as a player. Greg, when I played college hockey in my fourth year, we had a very good team. And the following year, 5 of us, so called better players on the university team, were recruited to play with a senior team in our city that was going to play in the league with the national against the national men team of Canada and the USA. And we did. I learned more in that year from what you've said. The veteran players, just listening to them speak the game as it was happening on the ice when you're sitting with them, talking to you about what situations were going on. I've never experienced that before. And I learned more that year than I have any other years, just being around veteran players, competing with them, and just appreciating how they simplified the game and didn't complicate it or confuse it. I think which coaches do, because they tend to see it through their academic eyes in a fashion that might be overcoaching and too detailed. But that's my example of being one of those players. And it wasn't necessarily that I got to play with them all the time on a line, just sitting with them on a bench during the game,
That's
listening.
one. Yeah, that's one of my big theories on why a lot of small towns tend to produce more talent. Obviously, there's benefits to being in a bigger space, but that idea of you're playing with different age groups and different understandings and people behind you and people ahead of you, the benefits to both sides. Like an older player, like teaching, you obviously have to know it well. Like that's a great way to learn, is by teaching, and then obviously being able to see the next steps and have someone guiding and mentoring you is super big. I don't know how you'd ever do the research to prove that, but I think there's definitely something there from a learning standpoint. That's why you should always, like, if you're in a AAA program, you should always at least once or twice a year have games against an age group up and age group down. There's just unbelievable benefits to both of that, and just being able to get kids around, or like having high school kids, for example, going back and helping out with some of the youth programs, like that's always a great experience. And it definitely helps clarify their thinking, but also it's just an enjoyable experience overall. Like, who doesn't love doing that? Who doesn't love being a mentor or teaching and learning? There's just yeah, endless benefits that I see with that.
When you say who doesn't love it, I think when you're playing, you don't think of it. You're just doing it. Um, and you're right about working with a younger team, for instance, combining two teams at a practice. One of the things that's um, happening here by plan is the U18 team has had a combined practice with the U15 team, or pardon me, U13 team, two age groups under, and the synergy that went on and the learning of the older players working with the younger players doing the same practice together. Um, I value it more now talking to you than I did watching it. I just valued the practice and the details of the drills that went on. But I think the younger players, we would find it hard to measure how it benefited them or how it measured the players, the older players, how it benefited them because it forced them to see things from a coach's eye. Um, I've got another story related to a similar example with the national women's team. Uh, we were doing a research project with uh, a professor, Joan Vickers at the University of Calgary, who's done extensive research on decision making in pressure situations. And her work is, in police work and that kind of thing, but also in coaching and players in stressful situations and their decision making. And she called it the quiet eye theory. The girls had to do a drill. It was a 2-on-1 drill where the situation could be they would face pressure or not face pressure, and they would have to make a decision in playing that situation. And there was a camera uh, in the sky observing the play for you to evaluate whether it was a good decision or a bad decision. There was a camera protruding from their mask, seeing what they saw as players. There was also a camera looking at the pupils of their eyes. And when the work was done, and Tom Malloy redid the same exercise that I did, um, we had to evaluate whether they were good decisions or bad decisions, whether it should be a penalty or not a penalty in that particular case. And students broke down the movement of the eye in terms of the decision being made more accurately. And it's sort of like common sense. The more experienced players, their eye was quieter. It wasn't looking all over the place. They were able to focus and, because of their experience, make better decisions more often. Um, Alan Aldo was there with NBC. They had cameras covering this particular event on the ice at the Olympic Oval at the University of Calgary, on the hockey surfaces that are inside the oval. And he stood beside me watching the drill. And as I talked to him about the drill and the nature of it, he said to me, "You're seeing it through the coach's eye." And that really struck me, the importance and the detail to which research has gone into this type of thing. Um, that was a long time ago. And I think it's all related to this. This is fairly deep in terms of information and a lot of information. Too much for the average coach to, um, you know, take and apply. But it shows you how the research that's going on in this area to try to get results. So I've gone on and on a bit, Greg. But do you have any thoughts on Joan Vickers' quiet eye theory? Have you heard of her? Have you heard of her research?
I've not. I've heard of the guy, Geir Jordet. Definitely not how you say his last name. Out of Norway, he does scanning research. So he's had like games where he's put like glasses on players, like university. So it's nothing huge, and done things like that, which is really cool because it really shows like the more you mature as a player, like you have the ability to understand what matters and what doesn't, and your filter is so much better, and being able to understand that. So yeah, research definitely agrees that I've seen. I haven't seen her stuff before, but Wally, I got to run here. This has been
Okay.
wonderful. Thanks for the conversation.
You take care, Greg. Thanks for getting on.
You too, Wally.
It
Take
was
care.
good
See ya.
listening to you guys. I just drove my son to the airport. He's on his way.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Tom. Take care, guys.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Wally,
Hey,
I think
Tom,
a
were you
lot of
able to
what we're
hear
talking
anything?
about is Muska and Mostyn, all different teaching techniques.
Yeah.
You know, guided discovery and command style, and even the thing he said about the cards. One of his things is task cards that you put up, and the students just look at those and go ahead with their stuff.
Would you explain that further? Task cards?
Well, you put cards in different parts of the gym or the rink,
Yeah.
and basically like stations, and they go and do the activity.
Yeah.
But you know, I know another thing was like when I taught phys ed, every fourth day the kids planned their own class, and they just take out equipment and they had to write down on the board what they're doing, and I just walked around and made sure I kind of gave them an outline. They had to do some fitness and skill and game and this kind of stuff, and they would go and do it, and I'd walk around and just to be there and to ask and to answer questions if they had them.
Yeah. So, Tom, in reality, you've been doing this for 50 years or 40 years.
Yeah.
And people are questioning it. Can you relate the story of the principal you had that didn't really appreciate that approach?
Yeah, well, that was exactly what I was doing. And it takes a few years to get to that stage. You don't walk into school and say that, eh?
Yeah.
And he happened to, that was when he came and watched, and he just says, "You're the worst teacher I've ever seen. You don't do anything." He didn't like me because he came into the school. And we just had a little school at St. Greg's. We only had like 130 kids or something. And we didn't have discipline problems. And he's an East German guy. You know him, John Marta, I think. And he thought he'd help teachers by having a detention room, which in big schools is great, eh?
Yeah.
But we didn't really need it because we didn't have these problems.
Yeah.
And I said, well, John, we don't really have, because I taught at other places, we don't really have those problems. We don't really need a DT room, and he never forgave me for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I said to him, I said, in your math class, what if you said to your students, you work on what you really need to, you get in groups, you get your equipment out, and everybody was sitting at desks helping each other and talking and had all the stuff, and then they put everything away after. And I said, you figure that was the greatest class you ever had? I said, well, that's what you just saw now. But he didn't really go for that explanation.
After all your years' experience, that story, how would you relate it to coaches today?
Well, remember that Bantam team we did?
Yes.
And we outplayed every team. But we had one goalie letting in 1 out of every 5 shots, 1 out of every 7. No matter how good we did, we had to outshoot the other team by 20 shots. And the one parent there really believed in bag skating. and he just was in the background criticizing everything we did all year. And he might have a point because his son played for Seattle the other day and probably is going to be in the NHL. But that was a little kid that could skate like crazy.
Yeah.
We're the only ones that would take him because he was tiny. He wasn't even maybe 5 feet. But we saw how good he skated. And the same thing with the goalie, the one goalie that was athletic, but he'd only started playing goal. So he was lost in the crease. And Jim said, no, he's a good athlete. We got to take him. But he ended up playing 3 years for the Hitmen. And Riker was All-Star American League last year. He got drafted as a 20-year-old. It took him that long to grow away.
Yep.
And he was All-Star in the American League last year. And he was the best player in the ice the other day, Seattle playing Calgary.
Yeah. Is he the same player, Tom, who his dad taught him to skate and he didn't like me teaching him to stride?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, his nose was out of joint like the coaches last year.
Yeah.
That he'd always coached his kid, and now these outsiders are coaching. And nothing we did was right. But the kid, I mean, right in that Bantam, I remember talking to this guy that was a scout for Seattle.
Yeah.
And I said, you got to get this kid on your list. I said, he's just an incredibly great skater. And I said, his parents are pretty good size, so he's not going to be tiny his whole life.
When did he grow? When was his growth spurt?
I don't know. He played major junior for 3 years for Regina.
Did he play AAA?
As far as I know.
Have you ever run into him or his dad?
No, his dad was the skills coach for the Royals the next year.
Yeah.
And he'd have one group after the other skating the circles. He never moved anything. And it was like a plowed field. He destroyed the rink. And, and 15 minutes of practice, the stuff he did was probably good. It just, like I know, like Gardner McDougall has bag skates every practice.
And he's won national championships.
Yeah. But he's also practicing every day.
Yeah. Do you think his bag skates are tactically correct?
Well, I've never seen his bag skates, but I would imagine they are.
Yeah.
But I know in Bemidji when we had a bag skate for 30 minutes Monday, Tuesday. And I remember I couldn't hardly stand up after.
Yeah.
But one thing they did, well, fitness-wise, but the one thing they did is a mentality of you're out there to work hard. I think that more than anything physically.
Well, the team you coached last year worked harder than anybody because of the coach they had. And they're going to be successful in life because they've learned the value of hard work and respect. And when Greg was on, I don't know if you heard when you were driving. But
I listened to the whole thing.
Okay.
Jim drove to get his girlfriend into the airport.
Yeah. He was anti-bag skate.
Yeah, I heard it. And
what do you think of that? Have you bag skated?
Well, it's like Tim Bothwell always says, it's not one thing or the other. It's not yes or no. It's how much bag skating do you do?
Yeah.
So I know Pierre in Red Bull, we had every once in a while they did skating, but a lot of turns and tight turns and all that involved in it. Very little just skating a straight line kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I know what I thought helped me the most in my forechecking, because I was a real forechecker kind of a player, was that wave drill, where the coach waves back, forth, left or right.
Yes.
So you have to really change direction quickly.
Yeah.
I thought that helped me in my gameplay. Because, with forechecking, you got to change direction really quickly and fast.
Yeah.
Well, I thought we had 2 great practices this week.
Yeah.
They're only 1 hour, so we had to be quick. But that thing Jim made up was so good, that little contest. I don't know if you read about it.
Can you describe it for the listeners?
He divided the ice into 4 sections. So basically, at the top of the circle there, where in Canada there's always a ring out line there.
Yeah.
Down the middle. So it was left, right, lower, high. So if he said left, all 5 had to be left. And if it was low, 3 had to be low, and 2 high. But they had to move the puck as quickly as possible. And it wasn't 1 touch, it was 2 touch.
Yeah.
Because the puck goes all over the place when I try to 1 touch it, right?
Yeah.
They had to take the pass and make a pass, but as quickly as possible, and move around. And they were doing scissors and, all, just to, and then he'd yell another place and they'd move it to there. And meanwhile, I took the ones in the middle and really worked on wrist passing, starting the heel and rolling it, so they always hit it from the middle or the front of the stick, and the puck jumps all over the place. So making flat passes. And then I did stuff, saucer passes, where they had to drop it on the red line.
Yeah.
And then doing a moving. But the 2 things, but his little deal there, I thought it worked good. And then we did the Bob Johnson power play right after that, with the one forechecker going in.
Yeah.
So they had to move the puck quickly. I thought the complemented each other really well.
You see the improvement in their eyes up, thinking, execution?
Yeah, well, we scored 6 goals on Sunday. Well, 1 was an empty netter, but against a really good team. And we move in the pocket. And another thing that really worked well, I watched the Wranglers practice last year, and just 3 forwards dump the puck in, 2 go behind the net. They go east to west to each other, and F3 is in the highs, like maybe behind the hash marks.
Yeah.
And they passed to F3. We scored a goal absolutely exactly like that. And then on a power play, it was almost like that. Went side to side, passed out and scored, and we got other scoring chances from it. So, but that's all 2 touch, eh? Take the puck and move it.
No, when you did it, was it 3-on-0 practice?
Yeah, Jim had the defense at the other end getting to move, so they missed the first checker, to get the shot through, because he thought our D was standing still too much. And we scored a goal on exactly that.
Yeah.
That's the point. The D moved to her left and let a wrist shot go, and the goalie didn't see it. So, yeah, there was things out. It was kind of neat because the stuff we'd practiced translated right to the game.
It sounds like Jim is taking to the coaching and got
He's
his
a really good
wheels
coach.
turning.
He's a really good coach. He sees the game really well, and and if he says, we talk a lot about it, and he says things, and I try to put in drills that things that'll complement it. We use a lot of transition games too, which I don't think very many coaches use.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing there are.
Yeah.
We even do a transition game in our pregame warm-up. We do a game of quick transition 3-on-3 in the pregame.
Can you describe that?
Well, it's 3 offense against 3 defense.
Yeah.
Right. And the defenders' teammates are at the blue line. They're first in line. So when you get the puck on defense, you pass to them, and they're on offense right away. So the guys that played, the players that were just on offense have to quickly transition to playing defense.
Is that Pern's drill?
It's like Pern's drill. The rotation's the same.
Yeah.
But they're not backed up by the red line, and they're not allowed to get the puck and take it over the blue line. You know, like you don't forecheck and over the blue line in Perry Pern's drill.
Okay.
This is just as soon as you get the puck, you're on offense, and they can be right on you, and you got to make a play. I think it's
when the defensive team passes to the other three, they're standing along the boards.
No, they're standing at the blue line.
At the right on the blue line, eh?
Yeah, it's all on one net.
Okay.
And then right away they're on offense, but they can be checked right away too. So if they just stand still, a good chance they won't even get out of there, and the other guys will get it.
Yeah, Jordan did the same thing, but he ran Pern's drill. They were standing on the blue line with Pern's drill. They didn't really. There was very little space and time, but it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was live and competitive. Yeah.
I'll even do it. They're at the ringette line at the top of the circles.
Yeah.
And it's really, you know.
Now, who's at the ringette line? The next three?
Yeah. So it's a Perry Pern rotation, but it just, you're on offense right away and you're on defense right away. It's more like a game. You lose a puck, you're on defense, eh?
Yeah. I really think that's the way to go with pregame warm-up. There's thinking involved. You know, when everybody comes on the ice at U13, I think everybody should have a puck and be handling it and turning and stopping and transition skating with the puck, feeling it. Yeah. And then getting the goalie warmed up, and the next phase would be a 3-on-3 game because you're going to play a game.
Yeah. Well, I think get some shots in between there. Like it depends how long your warm up is, eh? If you got a 3 warm up, what you just said is probably the best thing. But like we've had 10-minute.
Yeah.
And there's time to do, the D and center shoot at the net while the wingers pass and then they switch.
Yeah.
And but we 3 minutes or so of that 3-on-3 game is, but I know last year I think we got 3-minute warm up. You couldn't handle a puck and give the goalie a few shots about all you had time for.
Yeah. Well, you've got the tournament this weekend, eh? The Fire Starter.
Yeah, we play 2 on Friday.
Yep.
We play Red Deer again, and then we play Regina. So Red Deer is pretty good, and I would guess Regina is really good.
Okay, I've got to get a copy of that sent to me, so I don't have to look it up on my website individually.
Aren't you on our WhatsApp? Is it WhatsApp that we use, or Team Snap?
Yeah, I can't access it. Oh. I have to go to the website all the time. I've only got one team on Team Snap, but I have the Google Calendar for everybody.
Yeah.
On my calendar, which is through Team Snap. Yeah. But it's the handiest thing of all is to have all the games that are going on and highlighting which of our teams are there for me to figure out when I'm going to be there, if I can flip-flop between arenas and watch both teams play. So, but I've earmarked tomorrow because you have 2 games tomorrow, right?
Yeah, 2 games tomorrow, 1 on Saturday, and then I imagine if we win at least one of the games, we'll be at least in the bronze thing.
Yeah.
And then we play in a tournament in Kelowna the next weekend.
Yeah.
So we're getting 8 or 9 games in.
And Monday we've got that mission statement exercise. So I'm looking forward to getting that done. And after that, all I'm going to do is go to games and sit with parents.
Yeah. Well, the mission statement, that's for coaches, right? Monday?
It's for coaches this time, but then I do it with parents
Yeah.
after your
Well,
games.
I got asked that question. Someone said, "Is this just for the coaches?" I said, "I'm pretty sure it's just for the coaches, and then Wally will take the parents later."
Yeah. What you'll have to do is send the questions to the parents to do when we schedule it, before we schedule doing it with them while you're practicing.
Yeah. Well, Amanda sent them out, and she's resent them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting them back now. Every day I get up and I cut and paste the feedback from all the parents.
Yeah.
And then when I do the class, we'll go through the exercise. I've got the information from all the age groups and what they've written, and it's all pretty good stuff. And I
Yeah.
really think, Tom, I've done it with 3 teams now, parents,
Yeah.
and I think they really appreciate the fact that I'm doing the exercise with the coaches and we're supporting each other because we know how we're doing it and why we're doing it, and it's about development. And so one thing I noticed with all the teams, everyone is coached differently and coached really well, but in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, Roberta and Austin, they do more deliberate skill work than anybody.
Yeah. One of their practices before us.
Yeah. And you play those games and they figure things out, and you do skill repetition with high and speed and tempo and many puck touches. And Sean, he has high tempo, fast competitive drills.
Yeah.
In all 3 approaches, that's the way everybody is. And it's sort of the meshing of the different methods to try to get the result you want in the short term. So it's a good thing. I think it's going to work out pretty well for the year. I think the fact that we do this exercise, everybody's going to be appreciating one another a hell of a lot more than they have in the past, particularly parents and coaches.
Well, it's a lot. It's good than just being separate on your own. Even when I was with the Red Bulls, we sit in this coaches room, and 2 coaches from Sweden, a coach from Finland, a coach from Russia, Pierre's there, and we never met together and shared ideas. And I said that to Pierre. I said, why don't we have once a week we sit there for an hour and have one topics, power play, how to everybody throw their ideas out, what they think a good way to practice a power play is.
Yeah.
Said that would be terrific for all of us, but he never did it.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can arrange a session with all the U15 coaches and do that. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, we could.
Just to cover power play, and if they want to do a different topic another day, everybody brings their own ideas and shares them. It's a
Yeah,
good
well,
idea.
once we all get rolling.
Yep. No, I think we've got off to a pretty good start. From my vantage point, the lesson I learned with you last year, you asked me to do the exercise, and it helped. So without reaching that point of frustration where they ask for help, we're doing the exercise proactively. And I tell your story of how difficult it was to get a good start with your team, with your parents. And that's the truth, is there's no trust to begin with. And if you can create a communication, lines of communication where there's trust and respect for one another, you're going to have a really good season.
It changed everything because basically we were getting 9, 10, 11 people at practice. So no use doing team play. The third of the team doesn't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
plus they're missing practice.
Yeah.
But as soon as everybody started coming, then all of a sudden we became the best team in the league.
Yeah. Well, one of the parents maybe was on your team from last year complained that there weren't enough kids at practice. They were missing practice.
Yeah.
And that exercise makes them appreciate how important it is and holds them accountable to being there. You don't have any respect for the coach or the team or teammates when you miss practice. And that,
And
I
the
don't
parent
care.
at that age, because the kid, if the parent doesn't drive him, the kid isn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I talk a lot about carpooling and parents working together to get their kids there, and the commitment and the time it takes to play at the highest level. And they've all got to be all in on it and help each other out through the process.
Yeah, we're going through one girl she missed last night. I think she's playing volleyball or something for her school. She hasn't
Yeah.
said that. But
Yeah.
there was a training session at 4:30 and she said, well, I have a school commitment. But
Yeah.
she said she was sick all last week. And then she wanted to play on Sunday. She missed our practices, missed our meeting, when we went through the team play. And then she said, but I can play Sunday. And we said, well, no.
Yeah.
You don't know what we're doing. And if you're that sick, we probably don't want you in the dressing room right now.
Yeah.
And then she made one practice. And then the next thing, the dry land she wrote said, I have a school commitment. So basically, out of the last 5 things, she'd missed 4. So I wrote her and I said, that this AA is a big commitment. It's 5 times a week between practice, games, and dry land. So, I think if she can't do it, she should probably withdraw and let one of these girls that got cut on the team.
What about the girl that's speed skating? Is that your girl?
There is, but yeah, I don't remember which one it was. But I haven't heard anything more about it, so it was just too much for her. Well, if she's training full out training for speed skating and playing this hockey, I mean that would be just so hard. It'd be unbelievable.
Is she still making your practices?
Well, the only one that's missed is the one I just talked about.
And that's not the same girl.
Not as far as I know.
Well,
but, I'm still in the deal that we're getting to know these people. So,
yeah.
On the bus, I'm going to meet with each player and get to know them and have the board there if they're not understand stuff and go over it with them if they want me to. And
yeah,
we got a 8-hour trip to Kelowna coming up.
Yeah.
And Jim is fun now. He'll be getting on the plane right now for Montreal, and then they go to Rome. So he's gone for 8 days.
Well, you've got a good staff to help you.
Oh yeah, they can't come every time either because they both work and they both go to school.
Yeah.
So they make as much as they can. And then the goalie coach Kaylin was there last practice, and it was really good because she had the goalies. We did a lot of stuff at one end.
Yeah.
The one I told you Jim did. She was there, and then we played that 3-on-3 game low where you have to pass the point to go on offense. So that's in one zone too. So she got half of the practice to work with the goalies.
So what did you do at the other end without the goalies?
Well, that's when Jim did the 4 zones.
Right.
He did that while I had the other players in the middle doing passing. So that she had one in for the goalies.
So one of the things I always thought, if the goalies have a goalie coach, one of the things that I would do that needs to be done is a 3 versus 3 keep away game. And that's, I think the finished progression is keep away with tight turns only.
Yeah.
And then before you pass, and then skating backwards to open up the ice before you pass. And then backhand passes only, and then you've got to pass to the third player only. I think that's a hockey sense and tactical skill progression that needs to be done, not involving the goalies. So
Yeah, I can do it with a goalie too. Like I play two pass with those kind of rules.
how do you do it with a goalie?
Well, I play two pass with a goalie, and maybe before they can pass, they have to make a tight turn, or they have to skate backwards, or they, only
So,
forehand passes. I
so
haven't done one with. I haven't had 3-on-3, and I think in the neutral zone, Keepway's good 3-on-3 with the rule you said about passing the third player.
yeah, I'm just saying the goalies, they don't do evasive tight turns in goaltending.
No.
They don't do deliberate backward skating, backhand passing.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It's to
Yeah,
keep the other players busy while the goalie's working with a goalie coach.
that's right. And it's not just keeping the players busy, it's purposeful busy,
Oh yeah.
leading to everything you want them to do in a game that they're not doing in a game. Buying space and time and gaining space and time and supporting the puck. That's what's wrong. That's what's missing in hockey is better timing and support and use of your skills to create time and space. So,
And that's one of the reasons we played Botchko too.
yeah. No, Bochco teaches that. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that game sequence is what I call a cardinal progression um, to teach evasive tight skating.
Yeah.
To teach
And
back
we're
riding
still
with the
doing
puck.
we're still doing the tight turn, the long striding and then going backwards long stride.
Yep.
Then the tight turn, I blow the whistle, they turn towards the boards.
Yep.
And I blow it really quick twice. They turn one way, then they turn the other. Yep. But I saw something and I got this jam step clear in my mind what it actually is. And basically it's a slalom fake, your two skates on the ice at once. So you slalom to the left and then quickly go to the right with an evasive turn.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna incorporate that they'll do that, just a little to make the defender lean a little bit. So you slalom one way and then quickly the other way. And that's what that jam step is.
Yeah.
I never understood exactly what it meant. I watched players do it, but I didn't know what part was the jam step.
Yeah.
It's a lot less complicated than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Played against Tom Wiseman Tuesday, and boy, he does so many things naturally, like fake when he gets a puck and stuff.
Yeah.
Like he is so good at getting you to lean one way or, all that kind of stuff. If he was a great skater, he'd have played NHL. That's the weakest part of his game for sure.
Tom, your book, you had the girls run some length skating, level 2 skating up and down the ice. You remember that at your practice? Your two assistants.
Yeah, they did. They did the skating exercises, the edge work.
Yeah. Now, what I'm looking at your book right now, and right the number pages 162 to 165. That's what you should show to them. In fact, I'll give them a book. When they plan that ice time, lengths is just 162. And then starting card 29, it's skating around. But they've got something like skate backwards, one length of the ice, hold one stick in each hand and pull your partner. And it's really the stuff they were doing. Zigzag, which is linear crossovers forwards and backwards. Those are the details they could focus on. It's literally power skating.
Yeah. A lot of those examples are power skating. There's a whole sequence.
Yeah.
To the power skating.
Yeah, if you give them that time, it gives them doing something that's really going to pay off that you can't measure until they play games and you see their edge works improved or knee bends improved. I think that's the line between deliberate practice, what they're doing, and transferring it to the game.
Yeah.
I've earmarked page 87 to page 162.
I have a book right beside me.
Yeah. So if you look at page 87, principles.
I'm in my car right now, but
yeah.
Funny, I got the book here.
That's what I've told Roberta to read. I said, look, you don't need to read the whole book, but the stuff that you might get a lot out of, page 87 to 140.
Yeah.
Because everything else, it's sort of deliberate, progressive stuff. This is all thinking stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I want them to look at that. It says, page 115, I highlighted. In short, you put it in black print. The game plan is based on the total of individual defensive and offensive skills of the players individually and in units. So those are this is a vital section of the book that the coaches need to get so the players get it.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of those principles are written by Johanny, who's such a smart guy.
Yeah. Well, Tom, I'm going to run. I've got a mission statement exercise tonight with Mike Massey's U13 team, and they'll all be done. And I'm looking forward to the one on Monday night. They're supposedly going to have food there for everybody.
Yeah.
And do you know if there's a PowerPoint projector in the room at Father Bauer?
I think there is one, yeah, because when we had our draft,
yeah,
that's what we used, and I don't know if the projector was in the room or if that guy brought his own, because it was on a screen. Because as we drafted, you were at the draft. Yeah?
Yep. I think what I'll do.
Had it on the screen.
I've got your projector.
Yeah.
So I may bring it. I've put a PowerPoint together that I might use for that. But every group I do it with, I change it up a little bit, and sometimes it works better than others. But this one here, I think it's really critical for U13 and U15 because 15 is where the wacko parents are. I think their kids.
Well, they've just left coaching their kids.
Yeah.
And that's why I talked the way I did in that session meet. That that our whole point was to help the kids get better so they can move on.
Yeah.
That whether we win or not, I don't know. It looks to me like this is going to be a really tough league.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think there's going to be a lot of good teams that we play against, a lot of good players.
Well, I'm afraid that at the end of the season, they're going to say, let's go back to 2 teams because we might not win.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Airdrie, Red Deer was in second place last year, and we tied. And Airdrie is a really good team. The girls said they thought Airdrie was better than Red Deer.
Yeah.
Airdrie and Olds combined, because it was just Olds before, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're big. I saw the girls after. I stayed and I watched because Shumi's Bantam AAA team was playing after.
Yeah.
So I got a pizza and I watched. And these girls are walking by, and I'll tell you, the 2 girls are about 5'10". They could go into a bar
Huh.
that had just played, like farm girls.
Yeah.
But very attractive girls at about 5'10". And I'm thinking, holy geez, they're 14 years old. But girls are basically fully grown by grade 9.
Yeah.
They can't fill out, but they're as tall as they'll ever get.
Yeah. How's Mike doing with his Bantam AAA team?
They've done pretty well. Him and Phil is a really good. The 2 of them are coaching it. And before they had Cale McCarr and a whole bunch of guys that are playing the NHL. That's Sanderson that just signed a whole whack of money for Ottawa.
Yeah.
And they had those guys. But yeah, they're doing pretty well, and they'll do well. They're both really good coaches and really good guys. But I told you about McCarr, eh?
No.
He played Bantam AA, didn't play the AAA. Then he did the AAA. Then he played minor midget. He didn't, like my grandson made AAA right away.
Yeah.
He played minor midget before he went AAA, and then he went Alberta Junior. I think it was to Brooks, and then he went NCAA. Now he's the best defenseman in the world.
Did he play midget AAA or did he skip that?
I'm assuming he played 1 year of it because, the first year midget, you're 15, right?
Yeah.
And then second year, you're 16. And he played minor midget, so I can't see him going from minor midget to junior A because they wouldn't really have watched him, I don't think. I don't know. He could have played away. But I guess one story Mike told is some guy came to run him, eh? And he said, McCarr just stuck out his ass and the guy went down.
Yeah.
And the guys on the bench are laughing. And he came to the bench. He says, I see everything. Because I guess the guy thought he was just going to wipe him off the face of the earth.
Do you know how big he was in Bantam and then minor midget?
I don't. He's not even that big of a guy. Like
Would he be 200 pounds?
Boy, I'm sure he's 200 pounds. But
he looks big.
It's so exceptional.
Yeah.
Like his evasive turns and that, eh?
Yeah.
He starts going hard, then he's going the other way, and he turns the NHLers inside out.
Yeah. Yeah, he knows how to position defensively and how to jump in offensively.
Yeah. Well, he plays McDavid like a puppet.
Yeah.
Makes McDavid go where he wants to go, and then he takes a puck off him. He's the only guy in the league I think can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty exceptional.
Okay, Tom, I'm going to cut off here, and I think I'm only going to edit it into 2 parts. When Greg Revak was on, and then when you came on. So makes an easy editing time for me.
Yeah. Maybe take where I mentioned John Marta's name out.
I'll go to it right now and do that.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy.
All right. I'm sitting in the Tim Hortons parking lot right now. I've been talking to you.
Okay, take care.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye bye.